I woke up 7 days before the night someone was going to kill me, the same 7 days I'd already lived once, right after I proved Aaron Petrov didn't die by accident. This time, I skipped the department's protective detail and hired Nash Ferris instead. The quiet contractor I didn't learn was Army Special Forces until it was already too late. Not again. The clock on my nightstand said 6:14 a.m., my phone said the same thing twice, time and then date, and I stared at the date until the numbers stopped rearranging themselves into a mistake. 7 days before. Not figuratively. 7 days, exactly, before a man let himself into my apartment through a bathroom window I'd meant to get fixed for 3 months, and made it look like I'd surprised a burglar. I knew exactly what my own blood looked like on that floor. I'd seen the crime scene photos, clinical and cold, the way I look at everyone else's. Except this time I hadn't seen them yet, because this time I was still the one breathing in that apartment, in that bed, 7 whole days ahead of them. I got up. I didn't scream, or cry, or call anyone. I'd already done all 3 the first time, and none of it bought me so much as an extra hour. I'm a medical examiner, 9 years now, 5 of them in this county. I talk to the dead while I work, an old habit from my residency, something my mentor used to do that I picked up without meaning to. You narrate as you go. You tell them what you're finding, apologize before the worst parts. He used to say the dead deserve one more polite conversation, even if they can't hold up their end of it. I did it for Aaron Petrov 11 days ago, the first time through this week, and it's the only reason I caught what killed him before somebody could bury it as an accident. Aaron Petrov was 34. Compliance auditor at Wexler Regional Health, found dead in his car behind a strip mall, a needle mark and a fentanyl level that should have closed the file in a day. It would have, if I hadn't talked to him the whole way through, slow enough to notice the injection site was behind his own left knee, a spot nobody manages on themselves, not once, not by accident, and slow enough to notice the lividity said his body had been on its back for hours before somebody sat it up behind the wheel. I ruled it a homicide. I filed the report. 11 days ago that felt like doing my job. 9 days after that, I was dead in my own kitchen, and the last clear thought I had time to finish was that I recognized the man standing over me, and couldn't, for the life of me, remember from where. I know now. I've had 7 days to work backward through every detail I dismissed the first time, and one of them is a business card I never threw away, tucked in the drawer under my kitchen phone charger, from a workplace safety seminar the county made us all sit through 8 months ago. Private contractor, quiet guy, didn't say much, broke up an actual mugging outside my building 2 weeks before I died and left before I finished saying thank you. I'd meant to call him. I found his name half remembered during a hallway search 3 days before the end, next to a blurry local news photo of a veterans nonprofit fundraiser and a caption that used the words Army Special Forces like it was nothing. 3 days. I had 3 days of knowing, and I spent them too scared to pick up the phone. Not this time. 7 days left, and I already had the card in my hand. Nash Ferris answered on the second ring, the way people do when the phone isn't really the surprising part of their morning. Ferris Protective Consulting. You gave a seminar at the county building 8 months ago. Bathroom windows and predictable parking habits. I made myself keep talking before I lost the nerve. I need to hire you, not a seminar, the real thing. A pause, unhurried, the kind that told me more about him than a dozen sentences would have. Tell me why. Because I have specific reason to believe someone is going to try to kill me inside a week, and I don't trust the people whose job it is to stop that. Another pause. I can be at your office in 2 hours. He was there in 90 minutes, which I only understood the significance of later. Broad through the shoulders in a way that read as football, not military, until you noticed how still he stood. No fidgeting, no throat clearing, a stillness that looked less like calm and more like a man who'd trained his body out of wasting movement. He didn't ask why a medical examiner would think someone wanted her dead, he asked what she'd found. I told him about Petrov. I did not tell him I'd already died once this week, because there isn't a version of that sentence a sane person says out loud to a stranger and still gets hired. Wexler Regional, he said when I got to the name, and something crossed his face too fast to name. I did a contract there, little over a year ago, physical security audit at their outpatient pharmacy annex. And I flagged inventory discrepancies on controlled substances that nobody wanted flagged, and my contract wasn't renewed. He said it flatly, no self-pity in it. I didn't think about it again until you said the name. That was the first time the week bent slightly out of the shape I remembered. In my first 7 days, I never knew that. I filed it next to everything else I was already collecting, every small proof that this time could go differently if I was careful enough to use what I knew. He spent the rest of that first afternoon walking my apartment like he was reading it instead of looking at it, window latches, sightlines from the street. The loose board on my back step he fixed with 3 nails and a look that said, "We'll do this properly tomorrow." I made coffee neither of us drank and watched a stranger memorize my home in under 20 minutes. You always this thorough? You always hire security a week after deciding you need it? He didn't look up from the window latch. Most people wait until after. I'm not most people. No, he said, and something in his voice almost smiled even though his face didn't quite. I'm starting to get that. He took the couch that first night without being asked, boots still on, a man clearly used to sleeping somewhere he didn't own. I stood in my bedroom doorway longer than I meant to, watching him pretend to read a magazine he wasn't actually reading, angled so he could see the front door without turning his head. You don't have to do the whole night out there. I do actually. He didn't look up. It's not personal, it's geometry. Is that a special forces thing to say? That got the closest thing to a real laugh I'd heard out of him yet, short and surprised, like it had escaped before he'd decided to allow it. It's a tired contractor thing to say. Go to bed, Dr. Bennett. I went. I lay awake anyway, doing math I hadn't myself do yet. How many hours until the version of tonight I remembered, how much distance I'd already put between this timeline and the one that killed me. Not enough. 6 days was not nearly enough. But it was 6 more than I'd had the first time, and for the first time since waking up, that felt like something instead of nothing. 6 days left. I spent the morning of day 6 walking him through the parts of the file that mattered. Petrov's tox screen, the pharmaceutical-grade purity that read wrong for street product, the specialty pharmacy, Ridgeway Specialty, that processed an unusual volume of Wexler's pain clinic refills for a company with no storefront anyone had ever seen. Somewhere in there, opioids meant for patients were becoming opioids meant for profit, and Aaron Petrov had been 3 spreadsheets away from proving it when someone decided a syringe was cheaper than a lawsuit. Who else knows you're looking at this again? Nash asked. Detective Castle. He caught the case originally. I didn't like how flat that sentence came out. In my first 7 days, Raymond Castle had told me, almost gently, that I was reaching, that ME's ruled homicide on ambiguous findings more than people realized, that he'd keep an open mind. He'd said it the way you'd calm down someone standing too close to a ledge. You trust? I did. I looked at the file instead of at Nash. I don't have a good reason not to. I just don't anymore. Good instinct beats a good reason most days, he said, and that was the first thing he said that sounded less like a contractor and more like a man who'd learned that lesson somewhere it cost him. Castle called before noon, which in my first 7 days he never once did without me calling first. Heard you pulled the Petrov file again. His voice was easy, familiar, the same voice that had once talked me down like I was standing too close to a ledge. Thought I'd save you the trouble and tell you what I remember. Tox screen, ambiguous injection site, contested lividity. Cold case at best, Dr. Bennett. I know it bothers you when the math doesn't add up clean, but sometimes it just doesn't. I'm not calling it cold, I'm calling it open. Sure. A pause, brief, almost nothing. You still in the same apartment? Just want to know where to send the file copies, if you actually go through with reopening it. I gave him my address out of habit before I caught myself. It wasn't strange on its face, he'd had it before in every version of this week, on every form I'd ever filed with the department. But Nash, sitting across the table pretending not to listen, went very still at exactly that question, in exactly that spot, and didn't say anything about it until Castle hung up. He didn't ask where you live, Nash said. He confirmed it. There's a difference. You're being paranoid. I'm being thorough. It's the job. He didn't smile this time. Humor me. Don't tell him anything else this week that you wouldn't put in a public report. I told myself he was wrong. I wanted badly for him to be wrong, because Raymond Castle had shaken my hand at 3 different department Christmas parties, and once helped me carry evidence boxes up 2 flights of stairs when the elevator was out, and it is a specific kind of loneliness to start distrusting the ordinary kindnesses of people you've known for years, one careful question at a time. I didn't know yet how right Nash was. I only knew, hanging up the phone, that some old, useless part of me had already started keeping 2 separate mental files, what I actually believed, and what I was willing to say out loud to Detective Castle from now on. 5 days left and we went to see Petrov's widow. Renata Petrov answered the door already crying, which told me the department hadn't followed up in over a week, which told me exactly nothing had changed from the last time. She let us in anyway, made coffee neither of us drank, and when I asked what happened to Aaron's personal effects, she pointed at a banker's box in the hall closet she hadn't been able to open yet. Wallet, phone, wiped clean by the department months ago and useless. A paperback thriller with a cracked spine dog-eared past the middle, logged on the property sheet as one item and never opened by anyone, because nobody opens a dead man's beach read looking for evidence. I opened it on her kitchen table. The back cover had been split and re-glued along one edge, clean enough to fool a shelf, not clean enough to fool someone running a thumbnail along it on purpose. A microSD card, taped flat against the inside board. He read on his lunch break, Renata said, very quietly, staring at it like it might still be a mistake. He always finished the last chapter twice. Said it helped him remember plots for work. It hadn't been for plots. Nash didn't say anything, but his jaw did something controlled and furious. The same look I imagine crosses a soldier's face when a threat turns out to be exactly as bad as the briefing said and worse than anyone hoped. I didn't know yet what was on the card. I only knew, watching Renata Petrov's hands shake around a coffee mug she wasn't drinking from, that in my first 7 days, I never made it here at all. We sat in his truck outside Renata's house for a long time before either of us started the engine. He knew, I said finally. Aaron knew exactly how much danger he was in. You don't hollow out a paperback for a spreadsheet error. No, Nash agreed. You do it when you've already tried the normal channels and watched them fail. He was quiet for a second, hands still on the wheel. When I flagged that inventory discrepancy on the Ridgeway contract, I filed it the boring way. Internal report, CCE compliance, assumed somebody with more authority than me would follow up. Somebody probably did. I just never found out who, because by the time it mattered, I wasn't allowed back on the property to ask. You think Aaron filed it the boring way first too? I think Aaron filed it the boring way, watched it disappear into somebody's inbox, and figured out, probably faster than I did, that boring doesn't work when the people running the company are the ones deciding what counts as boring. He finally started the truck. That's why the book. That's why he never told his own wife. He wasn't protecting a secret. He was protecting evidence from the only people with the power to make it vanish. I thought about Renata's hands around that coffee mug, about a man rereading the last chapter of a paperback thriller over and over, not for the plot, but because it was the only place in his own house he could keep something safe. I thought about my own first 7 days, how I'd filed my homicide finding the boring way too, and trusted the system to carry it the rest of the distance on its own. We're not doing it the boring way, I said. No, Nash said. We're really not. And for the first time since I'd called him, he almost sounded like he was looking forward to something instead of just enduring it. 4 days left and Marcus Wexler found out I existed. Not directly, not yet. It came sideways, the way these things do. A call to my supervisor, Dr. Whitcomb, from the hospital system's general counsel, asking pointed, friendly questions about whether the office stood fully behind an internal homicide finding on an unfortunate overdose, whether a formal second opinion might be prudent given the sensitivity, whether Dr. Bennett might benefit from stepping back given the emotional nature of these cases. I'm not stepping back, I told Whitcomb. I'm not asking you to. He looked tired in the specific way of a man who'd spent 30 years trying to keep his office out of headlines. I'm telling you a hospital systems lawyer knows your name 4 days after you reopened a closed file. That's not nothing, Marlowe. Watch yourself. I already was, that was the whole point of the last 4 days. A basic search did what Castle wouldn't. A photo from a hospital foundation gala 8 months back showed Marcus Wexler in a tux with a practiced smile, one hand on the shoulder of a man Nash identified in about 4 seconds as Dale Prentice, a risk consultant whose actual resume, once you dug, was 3 parts military contractor and 1 part nothing anyone would put on paper. Marcus Wexler did not think of himself as a man capable of ordering a murder. He thought of himself as a man protecting 11,000 jobs and hospital system his grandfather built, from a compliance auditor who'd confused a rounding error for a scandal. He met Dale Prentice on the top floor of a parking structure downtown, because Prentice liked meeting somewhere with sightlines in every direction. The ME reopened it, Wexler said. Talk to the widow, that wasn't supposed to happen. Ms don't reopen closed rulings without a reason. Prentice said it like a man reading a weather report. Something's moving her. I'd like to know what before we decide anything else. I don't care what's moving her. I care that Petrov's audit trail stays a rounding error. Wexler's jaw tightened, and for one unguarded second the calm, grandfatherly Hospital Foundation smile slipped all the way off. She's a coroner, Dale. She cuts open bodies for a living and she thinks that makes her clever. It makes her a technician. Technicians don't get to decide what powerful men have already decided is true. Understood. Prentice didn't blink. Give me till the weekend. I didn't know any of that yet. Not the parking structure, not the sightlines, not the word technician sitting loaded in a rich man's mouth like a bullet he hadn't fired yet. What I knew was that a woman in a very good coat was waiting outside the morgue staff entrance when I left that evening, holding 2 coffees like we were old friends meeting for a catch-up. Dr. Bennett, Andrea Sloan, outside counsel for Wexler Regional. She held out a coffee I didn't take. I won't waste your time. The system would like to fund an independent forensic review of the Petrov finding, full transparency, a second board-certified pathologist, all costs covered. It's the kind of gesture that looks very good for everyone involved, including you. My finding doesn't need a second opinion. It needs someone to read it. People do read it, Dr. Bennett. Careers can move quickly for examiners whose findings are independently corroborated by respected outside experts. She smiled, the specific, patient smile of someone who delivered this exact sentence to other people before me and watched it work every time. There's a fellowship at Northwestern our foundation funds every year. Very competitive. I'd hate for anyone to think ambition played a role in a homicide finding on a fairly ordinary overdose. Nash, 3 steps behind me the whole conversation, didn't say a word he didn't have to. Andrea Sloan's eyes flicked to him exactly once, cataloged him, and decided he wasn't the kind of variable her firm trained her to handle. Tell your client, I said, that I don't grade my findings on a curve. I'll relay that. She was already turning to go, unbothered, a woman for whom this had clearly never once ended in her losing. For what it's worth, doctor, I do hope you reconsider. Not everyone gets offered the gentle version of this conversation twice. She was right about that, though not in the way she meant it. In my first 7 days, nobody had offered me any version of this conversation at all. I'd simply been found, quietly, on a night nobody official ever got around to watching. This time at least, I'd been warned first. It didn't feel like mercy. It felt like a company that had learned, somewhere along the way, that threats worked better as opportunities. That's not a bribe, I said to Nash, once she was gone, legally. I'm sure there's language for exactly why that's not technically a bribe. There's always language, Nash said. That's usually the first sign it is one. 3 days left and someone tried my bathroom window at 2 in the morning. I woke to Nash's hand already over my mouth, not rough, just fast, a single finger pressed to his own lips in the dark. He'd been in the guest room since day 5, at my insistence and his professional one, and later I'd learn he hadn't actually slept any of those nights. Not really, not fully, just enough to function, the rest of him listening. We heard the window latch give the exact way I remembered it giving, in a version of this night that had ended very differently, and for 3 full seconds I stood frozen in my own hallway inside a memory I couldn't tell from the present. Nash moved past me toward the bathroom door, silent in a way that had nothing to do with luck and everything to do with years I hadn't asked about yet. Whatever happened in the 90 seconds after that happened too fast and too dark for me to reconstruct cleanly. A scuffle, a body hitting the tub hard enough to crack tile, a man's voice swearing in pain, and then nothing, because Nash had him face down on my bathroom floor with an efficiency that looked less like a fight and more like a formality. The man wasn't Prentice, just hired muscle, gone by the time real police arrived, bailed out by a name on the paperwork that traced nowhere useful. But he'd known which window, he'd known I lived alone. Someone had done homework on me that a random burglar never does. You're not staying here again tonight, Nash said after hands not quite steady in a way his voice wasn't. Neither are you, apparently. Not really sleeping, I hadn't meant to say it. It came out anyway in the flat, too honest register of 2 a.m. How long has that been true? He looked at the cracked tile instead of at me. Since Kandahar, there was a checkpoint, a kid I was sure was wired, and I hesitated half a second because I wasn't 100% certain, and my second in command wasn't as slow as me. His jaw did the thing again. He didn't make it home. I've been half awake ever since, in case I'm ever that certain but wrong again. You weren't wrong tonight. No. Tonight I wasn't wrong. And then, quieter. Last time, whatever happened to you the first time through this week? Because I know there's a first time, Marlo. I've known since the 7-day thing slipped out of you twice. I think I let something happen once already, somewhere I couldn't stop it. I'm not doing that again. Not with you. I didn't correct him about the 7 days, I didn't confirm it either. I just reached over, in the wreckage of my own bathroom, and put my hand flat against his chest, until I could feel his heart working its way back down to a normal rate, and neither of us said anything else, because some things don't need finishing, just witnessing. 2 days left, and I finally opened the microSD card properly, on a laptop Nash bought in cash specifically so it would trace to nobody. 11 months of Ridgeway Specialty Pharmacy invoices, cross-referenced by Aaron Petrov himself against Wexler Regional's own pain clinic prescribing logs, color-coded, methodical, a dead man's last and most thorough piece of work. Refills billed to insurance that were never dispensed. Pharmaceutical-grade product moving out a back door that matched, batch number for batch number, a purity signature I recognized from one specific toxicology report. Mine, the one I hadn't lived long enough to run yet, the first time, and his, the one I had. This is enough, Nash said, reading over my shoulder. This is federal enough that local doesn't matter anymore. Castle's local. Castle, Nash said, doesn't get to be the last person who touches this. We almost didn't make it that far. I'd gone back to my own apartment for exactly 9 minutes, over Nash's objection, to grab the external hard drive where I kept my own case notes backed up, the kind of thing you don't trust to a laptop you might have to abandon in a hurry. I was in and out fast. I still noticed the car. Gray sedan, parked across the street with a clear sightline to my building, engine running in a neighborhood where nobody idles in February unless they're waiting on a person, not a pizza. I didn't recognize the driver. I recognized the stillness, the same trained economy of movement I'd started noticing in Nash without meaning to, except this stillness was pointed at me instead of standing between me and a threat. I didn't run. Running is what tells a professional you've made him. I walked, unhurried, the whole 9 minutes back to Nash's truck, feeling my own pulse in my teeth, and didn't say anything until the doors were locked, and we were 3 turns away. Gray sedan, corner of Ashland. Nash didn't ask if I was sure. He just checked the mirror once and pulled a route that took 4 extra minutes and crossed its own path twice before he said anything else. Gone. Good catch. I've had a week of motivation. You've had a week of training you didn't know you were getting. He said it without looking away from the road, and it landed somewhere I didn't examine too closely at 2 in the morning with a stolen laptop full of federal evidence on my lap. That's the last time you go anywhere alone until this is over. I don't care whose hard drive it is. I didn't argue. 6 days ago I would have. 6 days ago I still believed in the version of caution that fits inside an ordinary life, the kind that assumes the worst thing waiting for you is a bad diagnosis or a late-night phone call about someone else's tragedy. I'd already used up that version of myself once on a kitchen floor I wasn't going back to. We didn't call Castle. We called a woman named Dana Whitlock, a federal agent Nash had worked one prior case with years back, someone he trusted the specific, hard-won way soldiers trust people who've already been tested. I sent her the files at 11 that night. She called back at midnight and said 4 words that felt like the first real breath I'd taken in 6 days. We'll take it from here. Marcus Wexler had a hospital foundation gala scheduled for the following evening. The same night, I realized with a cold drop in my stomach that in my first 7 days I never lived to see. He was giving a keynote about integrity in modern medicine. The irony would have been funny if it weren't the exact backdrop, where in my first life I'd been dead in my kitchen for almost 24 hours already, my absence not even noticed yet by anyone who mattered. 1 day left and Wexler found me first. Not with a syringe, with a lawyer, a fixed smile, and a hallway outside Whitcomb's office, low enough that only I could hear it. Dr. Bennett, I understand you've been busy. He said my title like it was something he was returning, slightly used. I admire thoroughness. I fund a great deal of it, actually, labs, fellowships, your own department's new imaging suite, if memory serves. It would be a shame if all that thoroughness turned out to rest on a technician's overactive imagination. It's not imagination. It's a microSD card and 11 months of invoices. Something in his face went very still and very cold, the practiced warmth gone in an instant. You cut open bodies for a living, doctor. That doesn't make you clever. It makes you a technician who occasionally gets lucky and luck runs out. He straightened his cuff, unhurried. I'd think very carefully about whose version of events this city believes by Friday. I didn't flinch, mostly because Nash was 3 feet behind me and Marcus Wexler, for all his money, hadn't once looked directly at him. That night I didn't sleep at the apartment or the hotel Nash had booked under a name that wasn't mine. We sat in his truck 2 blocks from the Hospital Foundation gala instead, watching valets in red vests wave in cars worth more than my yearly salary, waiting for Agent Whitlock's signal, and for the first time in 7 days I said the true thing out loud instead of filing it away. I don't know if I get another 7 days if this goes wrong, I said. I don't know if whatever brought me back here does it twice. Then we don't let it go wrong. Nash didn't look away from the entrance. And if I'm wrong about that, if this really is your only extra week, I'd still rather have spent it exactly like this, next to you, doing something that mattered, instead of somewhere safe not knowing you at all. That was the moment the last 7 days stopped feeling like something I was surviving and started feeling like something I'd actually chosen. At 8:15, Agent Whitlock called with the kind of flat, careful voice federal agents use right before they deliver bad news. The magistrate's sitting on the warrant. She wants more on the batch number match before she'll sign, and she's not back online until 9 at the earliest. I felt something drop straight through my stomach. Wexler's keynote started at 8:45 and ran 20 minutes if he stuck to his notes, which meant there was a real window where he simply walked out the side entrance to his car a free man, the same way he'd walked out of every room his whole life, while a judge somewhere finished her dinner. She'll sign, Nash said, watching my face instead of the entrance. The batch number isn't ambiguous, it's a formality. You don't know that. No, he admitted. But I know panicking on your end doesn't make her pen move any faster, so we wait, and we stay ready either way. We waited, 8:40 came and went. Then 8:51, which is the exact minute I'd learn later, my phone buzzed once with a single word from Whitlock. Signed. Every second after that stopped feeling like waiting and started feeling like the last few pages of a book I already knew the ending to, except this time I got to read it instead of just being one of the names inside it. The signal came at 9:40. Not sirens, Agent Whitlock had asked for none quietly, so nothing tipped early, just 3 federal vehicles pulling up to a service entrance while Marcus stood at a podium inside, mid-sentence about the integrity of modern medicine, a room full of donors in black tie applauding a man who had, 4 days earlier, called a woman a technician to her face for noticing what he'd done. They didn't storm the ballroom, they didn't need to. Agent Whitlock and 2 others met him calmly in the hallway outside as he left the stage, and whatever she said to him, his practiced smile didn't survive it. By the time anyone inside understood what was happening, Marcus Wexler was already in a federal vehicle and Dale Prentice was answering questions in a separate one 3 cars back, and somewhere in an evidence log that would hold up in ways Aaron Petrov's paperback never could have on its own, 11 months of stolen invoices sat matched, page for page, against a hospital system's own prescribing records. Detective Raymond Castle was arrested 2 days later, once Whitlock's team finished tracing a shell account that had paid him, in 5 careful installments, to keep a homicide file moving as slowly as the law would technically allow. He lost his badge before he lost his freedom, which felt when I read about it like exactly the wrong order and also the only order that made any sense. Ridgeway Specialty Pharmacy's license was suspended within the week. Wexler Regional Health's board removed Marcus Wexler before his arraignment, which he probably would have called practical if he'd still had the standing to call anything at all. The federal indictment ran to 60 pages and named on page 1 the diverted batch number that matched a toxicology report belonging to a man named Aaron Petrov, and in a detail the U.S. Attorney's Office would later confirm nearly ended a second life as well as his, a woman who happened to run the tests herself. 3 other Wexler Regional employees came forward within the month, once the indictment made the diversion scheme public record instead of a rumor nobody could safely repeat out loud. A billing clerk from the Naperville clinic. A pharmacy technician who'd quietly resigned 2 years earlier, rather than keep filling prescriptions that didn't match the patients standing in front of her. Each of them had noticed pieces of what Aaron Petrov noticed whole, and each of them had stayed quiet for reasons I understood better now than I ever had before, not cowardice, just an entirely reasonable fear of what happens to people who say the true thing too early, alone, with no one standing behind them. Dr. Whitcomb found me in the hallway the morning after the arrests, still in yesterday's clothes, running on coffee and a kind of exhausted relief I didn't have a name for yet. "I should have backed you sooner," he said, which was as close to an apology as 30 careful years had taught him how to give. "I'm backing you now, for whatever that's worth." It was worth more than he probably realized, and I told him so, and let it be enough. I stood up at Aaron Petrov's reopened inquest 3 weeks later and read my findings into an official record that would never again be quietly filed and forgotten. Renata Petrov sat in the front row. She didn't cry this time. She just nodded, once like a woman finally being told a true thing by someone whose job was to have told her the truth the first time. I still talk to the dead. I did it for Aaron Petrov the last time I stood over him, and I meant every word of the apology, because some part of me already knew, even then, what it had cost him to leave that evidence somewhere only someone paying real attention would find it. My sister Delia called that same week, the way she did most weeks, asking why I'd sounded strange on the phone lately, whether everything was okay. I'd spent 7 days unable to tell her the truth of any of it, that I'd already died once, that I'd spent a week racing a clock only I could see, that I'd learned exactly how much a person can carry alone before the loneliness becomes its own kind of danger. "I'm okay," I told her, which was true in the specific, narrow way I'd gotten good at telling true things without telling the whole truth. I closed a hard case. "It's been a strange month." "You'd tell me if it was more than that." "I'd tell you what I could." It was the closest I ever came to honesty about any of it, and she let it sit there without pushing, the way people who love you sometimes know to do. "I'm okay, Dee. I promise." I meant it more than she knew. I still don't know whether whatever carried me backward through those 7 days will ever explain itself, or happen again, or turn out to have nothing but one very specific, very lucky kind of grace. I only know I spent it differently than the first time, out loud instead of silent, together instead of alone, chasing the truth instead of just trying to survive long enough to file it and hope somebody else finished the job. 6 weeks after the 7 days that didn't kill me, Nash was waiting outside the morgue at the end of my shift, the way he'd started doing without either of us calling it anything. Not a job anymore. He'd said as much, plainly, the week the case closed, and I hadn't corrected him. "Long one?" he asked. "Ordinary one," I said, and heard how strange the word sounded out loud, how long it had been since ordinary was something I got to have. Nobody tried to kill me. Nobody hid a fortune in a paperback. Just a very sad, very natural heart attack, and I told him I was sorry anyway. "You always are." It helps, even when they can't hear it. I looked up at him, at the stillness that used to read as strange and now just read as him. "I don't know if I get another 7 days if I get something wrong again." I didn't want to find out by staying quiet the way I did the first time. He didn't say anything clever back. He just reached over and ran his thumb once along my jaw, unhurried, the way you'd touch something you'd already decided you weren't losing twice. I was already safe, I just hadn't been standing still long enough to notice. Did she go far enough, or was she still too merciful? Comment justice if the ending was perfect. Comment harder if you wanted an even colder revenge. Your comments decide how ruthless the next ending should be. Like and subscribe if you want to be here for the next story.